Now, dear listener, you know I've talked to you a lot on the Politicrat Daily podcast about making your own podcast. And let me tell you something, Anchor gives you the best opportunity to do that. It's free of charge. Yes, it's free. And there are lots of creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your own phone or computer. How about that? And you can even add songs to your podcast from Spotify. It's really wonderful. You can do this, and it really is very easy. And Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you. It can be heard on all kinds of platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make some money too. And money making is a good thing. It's everything you need in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Thursday, May the 20th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, a conversation with Ade Fatuga-Dada. She is a footballer at Watford Football Club for Watford Women. And I'll be having a conversation with her about football and about life. Coming up next. With me on this edition of the Politicrat Daily podcast is Ade Fatuga-Dada. She is a professional footballer at Watford for Watford's Women. She is a winger, and Watford play in the Women's National League in England. Also in the Southern Premier Division, you will find at the top of that table, at least at the last time I looked, were Watford FC. So I am very pleased and proud of that as a Watford supporter myself, but even more so pleased and proud to introduce to you all on this particular day, the one, the only, Ade Fatuga-Dada. Welcome, Ade. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you for that intro. That was amazing.
You're most welcome, and certainly deserving of it. Thank you so much for your time. I there's several things I'd love to ask you. And it's just so good to have you here. It really is an honor. The first thing I'd like to ask you about is your upbringing in England, born and raised, grew up in England, and what you wanted to be when you were a small child. What was that thing that you said, this is what I want to be when I grow up? I'm just curious to find out about some of your background and what you wanted to be when you were a small child.
I think what I wanted to be then is what I want to be now as a footballer. I don't think that's ever changed. I got it from my uncle mainly, who take me everywhere with him. That's kind of always just been the dream, I guess, just to play football. Lovely.
And was there a particular football team? Because I do know, I have it on good information that you are a Manchester United fan.
I'm human.
So
I am a Man United fan, yeah, but Watford's very dear to my heart, so
that's great.
I'm a bit of both.
I see. Perfect.
I knew this question was coming.
You did.
It always comes up, all the time.
Oh dear. I'm sorry I couldn't have been more original, but
cool. I put it on myself, to be fair. I'm quite vocal about my love for both, so it's always going to be a question that's asked.
Absolutely. And about growing up and becoming a footballer, you must have been very passionate, not only about the sport, but also putting in the work that you have to put in. And from a small age, you've been dedicated to becoming the best and being the best that you want to be. And that's something that I, as a person, am always inspired by when I see people, no matter what their age, no matter who they are, who put in that work. You've put in so much work into your craft. I guess my question for you, Ade, is were there other interests that you had to either sacrifice, put to the side, or were you able to supplement your hard work in football with other things just to keep you balanced as a person?
I think for me, it was never a sacrifice, in any sense. I'd always wanted to be a footballer, and like I said, it's one of those things that I never felt like I was sacrificing anything for it, because it was what I wanted to do. It just felt like normal, almost like just going through the motions. It obviously wasn't, but it just felt like a normal day to me. I'd get up, I'd go to school, I'd go to football, and then I'd come home. I may come home later than any other kid maybe, but to me that was just normal. And I wouldn't have had it any other way, to be honest. There were other interests. Obviously, I was one of those annoying kids at school that was quite good at all kind of sports. My granddad actually wanted me to play tennis, and I'm quite quick, so I was into athletics and stuff, and I used to do 100 meters. So there were other things that I could have chosen, but really in comparison, there was no other sport I could have picked other than football, for being completely honest.
Oh wow! That again, I'm just so thankful that you're here and that you're talking about what has brought you to this point, because of course, as I think we all know, and all the listeners who are listening and who will be watching know, is that you really do have to be dedicated to your craft if you really want to get to where you want to be. And people don't just show up and pop up and end up thriving. They have to go through all those things, all that hard work. And I'm sure you've gone through some ups and some downs as a person, as a player on the field. What kinds of lessons have you learned playing football, or any life lessons that you've learned? And what kinds of lessons are those that have helped you to become a better player and a better person, if I can ask?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest one that sticks out to me the most is to never let the highs get too high and never let the lows get too low. I think in life and in football, I think it goes hand in hand. For me, there'd be times where, I'd be riding the high and something would be going well and it's like amazing and I'm just so up there, cloud nine. And then, something happens and then you crash it down. And it's especially with football, you get a bit of a, with any sport, you get a bit of a performer's high. I know sometimes, artists get it as well. I think that was the first time I'd heard it really, was performer's high. And sometimes that can be hard, when you just had an amazing game and then, you come back to earth the next day or a few days afterwards. But, I think growing up within it, I've always, tried to find that balance. And I think I found it now. And that saying helps me, reset my mind sometimes. Never let the highs get too high when you're in them and something good is happening. Because it's good to celebrate it, but also make sure you keep a level head, because, the next day, it means that low, that come down isn't as hard to take, if that makes sense. So if you just keep level in any situation, it's always, you can only end up either sorry, I'm putting this, you can only end up either there. If that's the middle, you can only end up there or there. You don't want to go from up there to down there. So
right.
Yeah, that's the best thing that, I've kind of figured out in my career so far and in life, I guess. And
in continuing with that theme, is there a piece of advice that you have received in life, on the field or off the field of football, or in life in general, that you've never forgotten? I mean, you've just talked about the highs and the lows, but has there been something that someone has said in your life, or say like you've read in a book or something, that has really kind of stuck with you ever since you heard that piece of advice?
Yeah, actually. There's a player I played with at Arsenal, Leah Williamson, and she might not even remember she told me this, but we were playing in a game once and I wasn't having the greatest of games. And she just said to me, look, Ade, you may not be having a good game, but the least you can do is run. And, try and run and make things happen, and, that's the one thing you can control. You can't control your touch sometimes, sometimes that will go awry. But, your legs, you can control that and you can run and you can make yourself a mischief, especially with the speed that you've got. And I never forgot that. And in games now, where, I may not be able to do what I want to do with the ball, off the ball, I know that I can work hard for my team. And that's one bit of advice that's always stuck with me.
Now, you've talked about, at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about having love for both Manchester United and for Watford, but but the environment at Watford, can you talk a little bit about it? I mean, you've got the captain, Helen Ward, or Wardy as she's called, and you've got a number of great teammates that you obviously you're great fans of, and you play together and they're great fans of you as teammates and all. Can you talk about the welcoming at Watford? Because Watford is, for people who don't know this, the listeners, is the quintessential family club. I mean, and as someone who myself is also born and raised and grew up in England, I remember standing on the terraces when it was called the Vicarage Road End, and there was no seats there. And that was quite some time ago. So for listeners who don't understand this, Watford as a ground, and Vicarage Road has changed tremendously. And it's a different place, but the atmosphere is really good. But one thing that hasn't changed is the family-oriented club roots and core that's there. So can you talk about that, Ade, about being at Watford as a person, as a footballer, and just talk a bit about the environment there, please.
I think the environment, it's always been amazing, despite anything that's happening on the pitch, it's always been an amazing club to be at. I've been around it for a lot of my life, and, it's a place that I call home. It's a place that I've always felt really comfortable to be at. I remember when I was younger, I used to kind of just aimlessly walk around Vicarage Road and people would always let me, and I never understood quite why, but that's how welcoming it is. And, for a Premier League club, which we are now, for that to have been possible is it's amazing, and it's a testament to, the values that they have. And, thanks to the great Graham Taylor, it's stayed imprinted within the club and in the community also. And I think that's a massive testament to him as a man and to the club.
Absolutely, Graham Taylor, definitely, as you rightfully say, one of the great influences at Watford, and really has stamped that family and community imprint onto Watford Football Club, and it's here to stay, which is really a great thing. And I appreciate what you had to say about that. Just a couple of other things I wanted to ask you about, Ade. In terms of what you talked about, you just mentioned about being on the pitch no matter what happened on and off the pitch. There's this core community that's welcoming and supportive. I did want to talk about one or two things about being on the pitch. And of course, as you and all the listeners know, we've seen a lot of social movements come up in response to a lot of the very real world things that are going on in the world, that have been going on forever in the world, dealing with oppression and dealing with racial discrimination and many other things, women's pushback against women and misogyny and all these kinds of very serious things. I wanted to ask you, if you could, to talk about your thoughts about taking a knee in football and whether or not that should continue, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a very important movement. What are your, as a person who plays for Watford, what's your outlook on that? We've seen some players in the Premier League no longer taking a knee. You've seen, I'm sure you know of this, and I'm not going to name the names of players who are doing this, but there are some players who aren't taking knees, and then there are some who are still doing so. And there's a conversation about whether or not that should continue next season. But I really would like to ask you, what are your thoughts on all of this?
For me, I think my thoughts are perfectly clear from, anyone who, follows me on any social media or, has me on Instagram. You can see in any games that I've played, in the last season, I've had a Black Lives Matter armband that I've played in for every single game. But for me, it's an important cause, obviously, because, I am a black player. And also because I think it's enough's enough now. I think a lot of players, they've had enough. I think it's, racial abuse is something that, I thought we'd left, back in the 50s or something, before I was born. And for it to still be happening now in this day and age, in the day and age of technology, and when people are so much more together and people can hear people more, and more voices are being heard, the fact that this is still happening now is tragic, really, if I'm being honest. And for me, it's important to keep taking the knee. I think especially now with fans coming back into stadiums, I think now not doing it now would be the wrong time, to stop doing it, for me. Because, they're the audience, they're who you're putting the message out to. So, why is it that when they're finally back is, when you want to stop doing that gesture? For me, it's counterproductive if you're going to stop doing it now. I think this is the best time. This is the time where, more things need to be said about it, and we need to keep talking about it, because, we can't just let it drift into silence. And, it's something that was during lockdown and we forget about it when the world restarts again. I think it's something that needs to be carried on, and we need to keep championing it because it's still happening. You see it every day in the news, on Sky Sports News, players being racially abused after certain games. And, it's just saddening to see. And I think, as long as it keeps happening, we still need to keep talking and keep sharing our views on it.
And in accordance with that, you just mentioned social media, or at least you alluded to it. At least that's what I was thinking as you talked about it, the racial abuse that players are getting. Black footballers are getting a torrent of it. And I imagine it probably wouldn't be hard for me to imagine that you too are getting this as well. I want to ask you about that, the misogynistic abuse, if you're getting that, because I would imagine that you are, and the racist abuse that you're most likely getting. If you care to talk about that, could you talk? I mean, you don't have to necessarily go into what they're saying or what they're, it's up to you. But I just would like to ask you, Ade, about that as well, and if it has impacted the way you play the game. But first, to talk about the types of abuse that I'm sure that you are also getting. This is not just Premier League footballers.
For me, I've not actually received any racial abuse on social media. I'm one of the lucky ones. But, obviously misogynistic, we get that all the time. Being female footballers, we're getting told that, we shouldn't be playing football or get back in the kitchen or certain other things, that it's not nice to hear. And I think for me, I kind of look at it as people are saying these things are people that aren't doing what I'm doing. They're not doing what, us as female footballers do. So I take it with a pinch of salt. They're saying it because, I don't know, in a way they're jealous that, they can't play for a club like Watford and say that they're a footballer. And for me, I'm in a good place. I'm in a good space. So, I can't, for me, if someone says something like that to me, words, they stick out and you hear them. But I can't ever let them get to me. I did when I was younger, when I was in primary school, and, you get taught sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. So, for me to be, 24 years of age now, things like that don't really get to me as much. I brush them off because I know as well in real life they'd never say such a thing. So, you've got to take these things with a pinch of salt and, read them as just words. But, I think there is more that can be done to stop these words being said without people being held accountable to them. Because I think most of these people wouldn't say these things if, their name was linked to their account or, their job was potentially on the line because of things that they've said. They'd think twice. And I think, the system right now is working against footballers or athletes and celebrities. And I think it needs to work with these people because, they're who brings the most traffic to these social networks. So, yeah, I think they need to think about that, or they're going to lose these people who are bringing, like I said, so much traffic to these places.
Absolutely, and for listeners who may not have realized this recently, women's football, men's football, and a lot of other parts of the Football Association in England and various other organizations recently took part in a social media boycott of all social media platforms for the very things that Ade has just been talking about. So, and that was a really important thing. I actually joined in on that too, because it's important to have solidarity with people. I mean, it's important. Athletes are human beings, and I think sometimes there are some in the world who lose sight of that. You are people. You are people. This is a profession you're in. So, for those listening, this is the very important thing, and these things intersect. Social justice movements and sports have always been intertwined. We can go back to 1968 with the Mexico City Olympics and John Carlos and a number of others. I forget the other guy's name. And they raised their fists for the United States on the podium. I'm sure you're aware of that too, Ade. So, and there's lots of other movements too. So it's very important. One or two last things to ask you. For your routine as a footballer, if you care to divulge or give away any of that, and I don't know if you're going to or if you want to, you don't have to. I'm just curious, how do you...
Go on, sorry.
No. No, why don't you go ahead? I was going to ask you, how do you prepare for a game? I don't know. Again, if you don't want to talk about that, I completely understand. There may be things that are very personal that you don't want to give out. So I completely understand. You don't have to. But I'm just curious, is there a particular routine that you have?
I mean, it's going to be a pretty boring answer, if I'm being honest. I am a big music person. So for me, music is very important for my mood and my tone and, probably the way I play, if I'm being honest. It's that important to me, I think, music. So the day before or the night before, I'll put on the most chilled out playlist, and I'll just kind of mellow out and try and, calm down a little bit. I like to think I'm quite a calm person anyway, so that would really put me into a kind of slumber. I'll kind of really mellow out. And then when I wake up, on the day, again, I'll put some calm music on, and I'll chill out and, I'll get into the shower and I'll get myself all ready. And then when I've got my travel kit on, that's when I'll put on the more upbeat kind of music, and I'll put on, I love listening to rap and J. Cole and Pop Smoke and all those sorts of music. So I'll put that on, and I'll have that in my headphones all the way to the ground, and then I'll get there. We'll normally get out onto the pitch and have a little look around. I'll still have my music in, and I have my music in pretty much right until probably when the coaches come in and they say they want to, give us the team talk. So I'm very, very music orientated. That really does set my mood, and I think that's probably the most important aspect of my match day.
Wonderful. And then the last thing I was going to ask you is about, and we've talked a bit about advice. We've talked a bit about lessons and advice that you've received. Is there any advice that you would like to give to people listening who may want to play football, or just advice in life in general that you would like to pass on to other people?
I think my one would be, the one I mentioned before, about not letting the highs get too high and lows get too low. Because for me, that's not just in football. That's in life. If you can go through life like that, it keeps you very level-headed, to say the least. I think, it's something that, like I said, I struggled with that. I'd get too excited about things or get too low about things, and things that I probably shouldn't have got too excited about or too low about, because life is always something that's always changing. And if you know that change is coming, you can kind of prepare yourself for that. And I think that having that mindset, helps me. I'm not going to say that, I'm never surprised when something bad happens, because obviously you are. And I'm not going to say I'm never happy when something good happens, because obviously you're going to be. But it's about controlling how you are in those situations and after those situations, when change does come, because life is ever changing. So, yeah, I think that for me is probably the biggest advice for me that, I can give to anyone. It's something that's worked for me. So I think, if anyone else wanted to try it, I highly recommend it.
That's really terrific. I really enjoyed this conversation. And of course, I would love to be able to continue conversing with you, Ade, and hopefully at some point in the future, maybe in the off season or another time, it would be great to talk again about some of the things we talked about and other things that I'd like to ask you, but didn't get the time to, because I know time is short and time is precious. So, Ade, it's really an honor. Ade Fatuga-Dada, Watford Football Club, Watford Women of the Southern Premier Division, doing very well and top of the table last time I checked.
Well, our season's done. It's been curtailed, so it's been cut a bit short. Yeah, we're kind of just waiting to see what happens now at this point. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Absolutely. Well, all the best to you. It's lovely to have you on. It's so wonderful to have you on. It's really beautiful to see you. Thank you for your time. It's just an honour to talk to you, Ade. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, and be well. Take care now.
And you.
Thanks. Bye. A very special thank you once again to Ade Fatuga-Dada, the winger for Watford Women in the Women's National League of Football in England. It's really an honour and a pleasure to speak with her, and I want to thank her again for her precious time. Absolutely lovely person to talk to, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation that we had. And so much to ask her. There was so many more things that I wanted to ask, and look forward to doing so in a subsequent conversation down the line, down the road here. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.